feel like having that screenshot of the logo at the beginning, it just pushes the production value of the show through the roof. We were already pressing up against the ceiling. There were a few damaged chandeliers from our production values previously, but we've actually gone right up into the stratosphere now, I think. Hello, Mr. Remington.
Hello, mate. I thought people liked watching my ugly mug performing. How wrong I was.
I don't know. We'll ask people to vote. So, ladies and gentlemen, what would you rather see? Would you rather see the beautifully photoshopped image that I slave over a hot computer screen for hours to produce, or would you rather see Mr. Remington Steele performing live and in person? You can already hear him. Do you really need the visuals as well?
If you agree, then type in, well, yeah. If you'd rather see a picture and my glorious music improvised on a different instrument almost every week, then type, whoa, no.
Whoa, no rhymes, so I think people are going to go with that. So, of course, ladies and gentlemen, it's the Andy and Rem Show, your one-stop shop for all things Age of Sigmar, tactical insight, comedy, live music, debate, intrigue. We've got it all right here, haven't we, Mr. Rem?
You certainly have. I'm in a fairly good mood tonight as well. Sorry about last week. I was a bit mardy last week, and I may have said a few things to offend people, which is always good.
There's a short list of people you didn't offend last week, so I'm just hoping that we can keep them in our good books for now. Now, I've noticed that your forehead's kind of cut off. You're going for the reverse Vince Venturella look, aren't you?
I'm just been, yeah, sorry about that. I was just
He's always got his chin chopped off on the video. You're going for the forehead.
I was just typing on the comments page because I've seen a couple of well yeahs on there. So, well, no, and a maybe. Okay. Well, it's all good. Whatever. I'm happy to be here.
Well, how about if people feel that maybe we could show a little bit of you and then a little bit of the picture, like we cut to you halfway through the intro song so they still get a taste for that Photoshop goodness, then type, whoa, maybe. So, in the audience this week, we have the following community legends. We have Hedgemongery, Lady Phoenix. We have YouTube Newbie, the long paragraph legend. We have Danny Ashby. We have Gloomdready Gaming. We have Zlobgoth Ashbringer, most incredible name. We have Sliggy Cece. We have, who else have we got here? We've got Magnus Edenmere. It's a very noble name. We've got Rasmus7814. We've got, for some reason, we've got Remington Steele in the comments, mingling with the audience before the show goes on the air.
I'm just keeping an eye on things there.
Yeah, people that were hanging out by the stage entrance. You were just stopping to sign a couple of autographs before going on stage. We've also got, let's see who else we got here. Last Dawn 79. We've got Andrew Starr. We've got Skazdal. I'm not sure I've seen that name before. We've got Eason T, another familiar face. We've got, who else? We've got Gorgasaur. We've got Reese Howard. We've got Alvaro QP and Tom Murphy just chimed in with a hi. So a plethora of audience members tonight. Now then, Mr. Rem, to kick things off, last week we were talking about the potential of our visit to Reef Town, which is a small village in South Wales inhabited by tiny little Welsh people, little Welsh creatures that sit on sofas and do live shows and recorded shows. But the thing is, when I got there for the expedition, we were a man down. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you, Mr. Rem?
No.
Would you like to give the audience your excuses for missing out on the reef expedition? 2
words, my friend. Real life.
It doesn't get any more real than this.
No. No, fantasy life. In a fantasy life, I'll be playing Age of Sigmar on a very regular basis, but real life kicked in strong last week. I have a busy work schedule, and I couldn't make the 3-hour drive across the country to Reef Town, and it would have been awesome because it would have been a 2 versus 2 dream matchup, okay? And we could have probably got a few games in, but you know what? We've got to look at this as just a prequel to the main event, which is going to take place at Warhammer World, Andy. And I will pay for your train ticket, all right?
Oh, well, can't argue that. He said it now, folks.
Yeah, to make up for it, all right?
That statement has been preserved forever on the internet. I hope you realise that.
Book it now, so it's really cheap.
Well, if I book it now, then how do I know that real life isn't going to kick you squarely in the gonads when the time comes rolling round again?
No, it won't this time. I promise.
We'll see. So, to kick things off, I'm thinking maybe I should tell the audience a little bit about my journey there, and then we'll actually get into the meat, get into the juicy center of the Reef Town expedition later on with some pictures after we do the new releases and all that fun stuff. So the journey itself. Now, real life, of course, is secondary to everyone who has their priorities, right? Wargaming always comes first. So I was up at 5:30 in the morning, as any true wargamer is, for any kind of lengthy expedition or excursion, if you will. So I was all prepped for a most likely 4-hour journey. I needed to get a tram into Manchester, then get a train down to round about the Stoke region, where I was going to assemble with Mr. Pezzapoo, hop into his van, and then we were going to drive on down there to Reef Town, which once we got into the van was probably going to take almost 3 hours. So I had this plan. It was down to the most meticulous tiny detail. Unfortunately, my watch was running slow overnight. And I didn't have the foresight to check my phone for the time as well, which meant that I ended up missing my train by 1 minute.
Oh.
The train down to Stoke. And the next one was an hour later. So I was forced to sit in the train station, knowing that all that juicy Age of Sigmar goodness was going to be delayed by at least an hour. And Mr. Pezzapoo, of course, was delayed as well. But I am reliably informed that he managed to entertain himself by playing Farming Simulator on the PlayStation. I don't know whether he wants that made public, because it's not something that people admit to readily. But it's out there now. So if you're going to judge him, I don't think you should judge him too harshly, though, because we all make mistakes. Him racking up 150 hours on Farming Simulator, I'm sure we've all done just as bad. We've done something in our life that we regret, haven't we? Yeah. Not one of you out there should be throwing stones. So then, got down into Pez country. We made the lengthy voyage down there into Wales. Suddenly, as soon as you cross over the border into Wales, it becomes apparent that the whole country is kind of Shire-like. These tiny little houses with small little people running around outside with bare feet. Very hairy feet as well. But the one person in Wales who's not small with hairy feet, I didn't actually see his feet, but Mr. Reef, he's not short at all. I'm surprised by that. I thought he'd be a little guy because he's always sat next to Martin on the sofa, who is apparently a giant. So that makes him look smaller. So he's not as tall as me, so don't get any crazy ideas, but he's reasonably gifted in the height department. So Mr. Pezzapoo was definitely the, what's a polite way to put this? The vertically challenged member of the party.
Well, you know, Mr. Reef is actually an ex-rugby player.
You can be small and be a rugby player still, though, can't you? There are positions in rugby that you can be quite a slight fellow.
Absolutely. I think they call them props.
So then, I'm not going to tell you about the games we had because I've got pictures to back that up, so that's going to be a whole nother story. The journey back, there were 2 possible trains right at the end of the day. There was one at 9:15 and another one at 10:30. And of course, we got to the train station about 2 minutes after the 9:15 one, which was a blessing in disguise, even, because I got to visit the Pez Cave, which is a wonderful little shed that he's got in his back garden, which, like the entirety of Mr. Reef's house, is deceptively small. On video, all these rooms look so huge because people have their cameras pointing up. So it looks like there's just got this huge chamber behind them, but really, they're living in these little hovels the whole time. So that was fun. And then I got the train back to Manchester very late at night. The last train and the last tram. So any kind of error there, and I would have been stranded somewhere in the country. But luckily I made it home in one piece. The same can't necessarily be said for all my troops. Physically, they made it home in one piece. I'm not sure about the mental scars that they endured from that trip to Wales, though.
Well, I'm sure being dwarves, they're hardy enough to cope.
I think they are. A few grudges were put into the book, though, on the back of that.
Actually, speaking of dwarves, there's a new trailer that Total War, in conjunction with Games Workshop, have put up for the Warhammer Total War game.
I have seen that, actually.
It looks awesome. It's based around Thorgrim Grudgebearer and the invasion of the orcs and goblins into his kingdom. And of course, this is an old story and part of Warhammer folklore now, pre-Age of Sigmar. But it's no doubt a terrific homage to that time. And I'll be definitely playing that game when it comes out in 2016.
One thing I will say, though, I think it was a dwarf engineer in the video, or at the very least, some kind of pilot.
Yeah.
He fell for the oldest horror film trick in the book, didn't he?
Yeah.
He didn't just start up his vehicle and leave immediately. He had to look around and dilly-dally, and it ended up costing him dearly. Cost him his life.
Well, you don't actually see his life being taken, do you? It's
Well, I think, being a dwarf, it's possible that he could have fought off those 100 or so spiders that were surrounding him, some of which with goblins on the back. Actually, I did see a couple of people complain about that video that it didn't have an arachnophobia warning on it. Because those spiders do jump out suddenly, don't they, in that video?
They do. It looks superb. It kind of like made me want to get back into my dwarves again, you know. So I just can't wait myself for the, you know, these old factions to re-enter the current Warhammer fantasy. What's the word?
Setting.
Setting, if you like. I've nearly finished the first Warhammer novel, Age of Sigmar novel now, and I actually bought the Quest for Galmoraz novel, so that's all ready and fired up and loaded for when I finish the first book. And although I'm enjoying them, I am missing the presence of some of these older races, if you like. Although this one, the Skaven have now entered the fray, and a Vermin Lord, and also Bolithrax, a chosen great unclean one, the greater demon of Nurgle, has entered the fray, and it's all quite exciting. And it's good to sort of move away from the chaos things just for a little while. It'd be nice also to perhaps move away from the Sigmarines somewhat.
Surely not. They didn't invest in that statue outside their headquarters so they could move away from them, did they?
Well, you know.
It would be nice to have some kind of skirmishes going on a realm that doesn't necessarily involve the Stormcast swooping in and the chaos there, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I you know, just have to be patient.
We do. And if you're thirsting for the old world, then of course Total War Warhammer is going to quench that particular need. Hopefully, it's looking good.
I'll tell you what, Andy, the girl in the Games Workshop store in Lincoln, I've said it before, she's pretty cool. She doesn't hassle you too much when you're just browsing. And if you want to talk shop, she's more than happy to engage. And she was telling me that Warhammer 40k players have been pulling their hair out over the last 6, 7, 8 weeks or so because there's been no major 40k releases. And it seems that in the next couple of weeks, they're going to get their wishes granted. And it looks like the seesaw of 40k and Warhammer Fantasy is going to be tilting back, unfortunately, into 40k's favour for the near future. And they don't know when we'll see any of these new factions, because she told me that they only know a week in advance of what's coming out. And if you pay attention to the Warhammer Google Plus forum, Age of Sigmar, or Warhammer YouTubers, we also see about a week in advance what's coming out as well, because of pirated postings. So we're just as in the know as people that actually work for Games Workshop, apparently.
Well, we think that there could be some knowledge just under the surface that they don't let slip. But you'd think at least one staff member by now would have told the world about that, wouldn't you?
Okay.
So I'm going to have a quick look through the comments before we get to the new releases and all that juicy stuff. So Zlobgoth. I think I should clarify this once and for all. He said he discovered my channel because of my Betrayed Wargamer series, and it seems that I've changed my mind since those videos. So, if you hadn't noticed, that is a character. The accent usually tips people off. And anyone who sees that video first, they kind of think that's me, and then they're surprised when they see the other videos, and they get, oh, I get it now. Or sometimes they don't watch any of the other videos, they just dislike that, call me a lunatic, and then go about their business. So,
we've had a comment here about Thorgrim Grudgebearer's accent in the video we were talking about for Total War, and I have to agree with you, my friend. His accent seems a bit too English to be a dwarf, but if you notice carefully, it slips into a slight Scottish lilt towards the end of the video, and into what we see as what we hear as and recognise the dwarf accent being Glaswegian.
Yeah, you normally associate dwarfs with being either Scottish or possibly Scandinavian, don't you?
Yeah.
Not usually English, maybe Irish, maybe a little bit of Welsh. Something Celtic or Scandinavian usually, isn't it?
I wouldn't say Irish, Andy. I think if the Warhammer world had gnomes, then they could perhaps be Irish.
Leprechauns, perhaps.
Leprechauns, yeah. Maybe that could be a new race. If anyone's a fan of Warhammer Weekly, which I am, Vince Venturella this week has posted up an open invitation to put down in video what you'd like to see for future factions in Age of Sigmar. So I'm putting my 2 pennies worth in. It used to be some kind of underwater faction, Sea Devils or something like that. But I think I've changed my mind now. I want to go for gnomes and leprechauns.
Oh dear. Okay, so I think we can get the poll results from the question we posed at the beginning of the show. So regarding whether people want to see you actually performing or whether they want to see the logo for the show, we've got a whoa yeah. We've got you threw in a whoa yeah.
Well,
I'm not going to count that because that's you, isn't it? We've got another whoa no yeah, so that person was a bit undecided. We've got a maybe whoa no, and we've got a whoa somewhat, and yeah, I think that's all of them. So I'm thinking that we'll go with my idea, which is a little bit of both. Maybe we start off with the image for the first 10 seconds or so, and then just as you're getting into the meat of the song, we cut over to you so you can really go nuts and captivate the crowd.
I like the sound of that, Andy. That sounds like live TV.
It does, because we know how to fire up the audience, don't we?
We do.
We've been doing this a long time now, guys. We're veterans at this. So I'll just scroll down and see if anyone else had anything to say on that. Well, actually, Mr. Pezapoo wants to know what's happened to your hair.
I've just not washed it for a few days, so this is what happens.
That's disgraceful.
When you're working in a school full of grubby children, you tend to just need a shower and I'll be all right.
Do they call you old Mr. Greaseball by any chance?
No, to be fair, they actually think I'm quite cool. But they don't know about my Warhammer secret, I suppose.
Yeah, you probably keep that one under wraps, don't you?
Yeah.
Do they know about your musical stylings?
Yeah, all the time. They always asking me to show them videos of my band and stuff like that. It gets quite embarrassing after a while because when you're doing gigs and stuff, they sort of tend to grass you up if you skive off work.
Oh dear, oh dear.
So yeah, that fooled that little thing I had going. So yeah, it's become a bit more complicated now.
Right, so in the time-honoured tradition, what we're going to do now is look at the new releases. So here we go. First of all, we've got the Stormcast Eternals book limited edition, only £85, and it can be yours. What do you think?
Ooh.
It's a nice piece of artwork, isn't it?
Okay, so you're getting a hardback cover. You're getting some, I don't know, what are they?
They look like some kind of prints.
Okay, prints you can frame if you want to spend even more money.
They've got rounded edges as well.
Do Just like the iPhone 7, eh?
Maybe that's it. They're keeping with the times, aren't they? So it looks like it's got a nice hardbound cover. I'm sure you've had a couple of the limited editions,
No,
haven't you?
no. I've never bought a limited edition Warhammer product.
Well, it looks pretty tasty, but you would imagine it would for £85. And look at that tasty gold as well. The edge of the pages are gold as well. I wonder if those sealed with Sigmar's own dust.
I mean, people must buy these things, otherwise they wouldn't produce them. I mean,
well, they're limited and they usually sell out, but I don't know whether that means they had 5 or whether they had 5,000.
Well, yeah, I still feel like a mug for buying the Wood Elves and the Dwarves rule book last year. Seeing as Age of Sigmar came out and kind of scrubbed everything from last year.
Well, it looks like they've got 1,000 here. 1,000 of these. So whether they really have 1,000, whether they actually have maybe 5,000, and then when the first 1,000 sell out, and then at Christmas they'll come back and say, well, actually, you wouldn't believe what we found in the back of the warehouse, but guess what's back in the style of Space Hulk?
Well, you have to think it's £85,000 they could make off those, you know.
Yeah, and usually it has to be said, though, these things don't seem to come back after the limited edition run is claimed to be over. So it's very unlikely to be a Space Hulk situation. So if you're really desperate for one of these, you should probably dive in there instantly, because they do seem to go, just the words limited and edition arranged in that order seem to send people into a frenzy, don't they?
Do you have any limited edition Warhammer products, Andy?
I do not. Not that I can recall. I certainly haven't paid a price such as this for a book.
Maybe someone can write in if they own any limited edition products and tell us if you think if it was worth it or not.
Yeah, if you think it was worth it from the perspective of an avid fan of that particular army, and whether you think the quality justified the price. So moving on to the next page, we can look at the other releases. These are the pre-orders. So because the prosecutors are out now, of course, we've got lots of combo packages containing those. So let's scroll down here and have a look, first of all, at the first variant, which is the Angelos Conclave. So it looks like these are your basic prosecutors with the 2 hammers, one with the big axe. I'm not sure I'm seeing too much of a difference between these and the ones in the starter box. I imagine it's just the bits and the posability that you're going to get.
Yeah, of course, it's the weapons, isn't it?
Yeah, and in this particular pack, you get 2 boxes. That's why it's 70. So going back, and we can look at some different ones now. Prosecutors with Storm Call Javelins.
I do like the look of those, and I like that color scheme. They look a lot more Greek or Macedonian with the Spartan shields, don't they? I like them.
Is that a black, or is it a kind of dark red?
It's quite leathery. It just makes me think that if they didn't have all that armor, how glorious would they look with just the skin showing? They'd look a lot more Spartan-like, wouldn't they?
They would also look very naked.
Yeah, but why would these flying guys wear so much armor? Surely it affects their maneuverability.
Well, I don't know. They get being guided by Sigmar's light. They have those. I like the round shields, actually. I quite like all the shields they've come out with. I'm just a fan of shields in general, I think.
Yeah, I do like those shields. I would definitely choose them if I was building an army up.
They look very heroic, don't they, with those weapons?
Yeah.
So the next, we've got the Celestial Hammers, which is just the standard. Then, I wonder if we've got any more on page 2. Aha. Knight Azeros. So this is the guy with the lantern, the flying lantern. Look at that, wings. £25 for one guy. It's not too far out of line compared to their recent pricing strategy, but it doesn't seem sufficiently different from the basic prosecutor to warrant him being that price compared to them.
No.
They're 35 for 3. He's 25 on his own, and all he has that's different is a lantern and a bird.
Well, again, I go back to my point of putting too much armor on things. It loses a lot of personality. But yeah, they still look amazing, especially this one.
What you could definitely do is buy one of these, and then with the spare parts, you could convert a prosecutor and get the other one out of it, couldn't you?
Yeah, you could.
I do like that little bird there.
I do like that bird as well. Yeah.
What do you prefer, that or the lantern with wings?
I think I'd have to say the bird, but that lantern's pretty cool. Does that lantern do anything special?
I think it probably does. Well, you know what? We could just look at that right now. Here we go. Knight Azeros. Let's see. Illuminator of the Lost. In the shooting phase, you can reroll hits of 1 for attacks made against enemy units that are within 10 inches of this guy. So that's quite good. The Light of Sigmar. Once per battle in your hero phase, you can declare that this model will unleash the searing light of its celestial beacon. If you do so, it cannot move, charge, or pile in during your turn. However, each enemy unit within 8 inches of the Knight Azeros, when the searing light is unleashed, suffers D3 mortal wounds as they are blinded and driven from the battlefield. The light is anathema to chaos units, so they suffer D6 mortal wounds instead.
Wow. That could kill chaos champions, couldn't it? Sure.
Yeah, he's pretty tasty, isn't he?
Yeah.
Oh, we don't want to get to that yet. So, that does it for the releases. And I think they're pretty tasty, those characters, aren't they?
Yeah, very good. Like them a lot.
If they were a little bit cheaper, I'd be definitely tempted to get one. As they are, I could see myself potentially trying to use parts to convert one of them up instead. But it remains to be seen how easy that is. I'm sure keeping an eye on the various Facebook groups would be a good idea for people looking into that kind of thing. Now, this is one of those images that gets leaked to all the big name Facebook and Google Plus groups, of course. This appears to be the final Stormcast release of this particular wave. So you've got a guy who, at first I thought this was a trumpet, but it seems like he is actually holding it up to his eyeball and not his mouth. So it looks like he can just see a really long way away. Maybe he's looking all the way up into the celestial realm for guidance from Sigmar, who's giving him kind of sign language from atop a cloud. That would make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I didn't realise there's going to be any more releases. That's a bonus, I suppose.
And then this guy, there's speculation rife that he could be a potential spellcaster.
Well, these are called Lord Relictors, and they're not these sort of characters. In the book, there's we've already met 2 or 3 of them, different Relictors that belong to different regiments, if you like, Stormcast Eternals. So, and they've all got different names, you see. So it makes sense that the standard bearer, his sigil looks slightly different.
Yeah, you would think you'd be able to call down some kind of lightning strike, wouldn't you, with all that going on? Those are the biggest bolts of lightning I think we've seen on any of the Sigmarite models so far. And this guy, with the telescope, whatever you want to call it, his kind of loincloth looks different to the rest, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? I wonder if when he blows through that, it shoots out some kind of gunpowder.
I really hope not.
Organ gun part or something.
It looks like some kind of animal, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Rather than the armor, which looks more like kind of fish scales, the armor, doesn't it, on there? That looks more possibly feather-like. Like maybe one of those little tiny birds. As it regressively passed away, he was able to make the best of it and harvest its feathers to create a rather fetching outfit.
Yeah, it's an odd new release, really. It feels like these should come with a prosecutor box set.
We'll see, I suppose. But the thing you have to say about the Stormcast now is that they don't really have a huge variety of troops, but they have quite a lot of different characters now.
Yeah, that might be a trend that we see going forward because, of course, with Sigmar, Age of Sigmar, you have less models.
So encouraging people to go out and buy these individual characters, I imagine they're cheaper to make because it's just probably a single sprue, and then they can charge 20 to 30 pounds for a single character rather than an entire unit. So I think that could definitely be a move that they're making going forward.
There is that, but I do think Age of Sigmar is giving the hobbyist a new lease of life. And so one thing I was thinking about this week, because I bought a load of round bases, and I've just been rebasing my witch elves because they're all stuck on little 20 millimeter bases. I've been putting those bases on top of the round ones, and then putting some mouldy stuff on the bottom. You're not going to see that very well, are you?
You're showing off your mouldy bottom.
Can you tell what that is? I don't know if you can. Well, if I do that, that might help.
Some high-tech wizardry going on here. What are we looking at exactly?
Oh, you can't see it. Doesn't matter. Anyway, I've hidden the fact that I've put a base on top of a base quite well. But it's these witch elves kept falling over all the time. And the great thing about the round bases is your models don't get knocked over so easily. They look better on round bases. I'm kind of turning on to the round base thing now. I'm being converted.
By the way, I've just checked in the comments. YouTube newbie is going nuts for the idea of fishmen. Yeah. And the fact that we suggested that those armor plates resembled scales, that's just tipped him over the edge, and he's gone into kind of a frothing rage, talking about how much he really wants to see fishmen in Age of Sigmar.
Well, it's not a new idea by any means. And the alternative Warhammer Armies book project by Matthias Eliasson, he's actually written a sea creature fluff book with all stats and various characters. It's got mermaids in it, giant clams, leviathans. And it's kind of got like a Zeus / Poseidon like creature with a trident as their kind of underwater king. Look pretty cool.
Interesting. Now, Andrew King in the comments has suggested that the wings on those guys are a pain to paint. Now, have you painted a prosecutor yet?
No, I haven't. No, but
I've heard people say they're a pain, but just looking at them, I'm struggling to see why. Maybe it's the style I would probably use on them. I'm thinking I'd just spray them all.
Yeah.
Most likely white, and then I'd probably put a wash over the whole thing, and then just get the white again and just paint on the top surface in white, leaving the crevices darker.
Yeah, I would, if you don't have an airbrush, which seems like the best solution, like you say, I would do wet blending. That's what I'm calling it. I'm sure there's another name for it, but quite a watery base colour. You put on, and you mix colours while it's still wet on the model itself, and that might look quite good on those. So you've got to get the right blend. But I've been using that technique for a few years now on large patches of skin, on when I'm painting water scenery. Use a wet palette for that. It might be good rather than the dryness that would kind of make it quite grainy and bitty looking and ungraceful for a wing.
I could definitely see that. I think the airbrush fanatics out there could do a really good job on the wings, though, couldn't they?
Yeah.
It seems like any large model that has just a long surface like that is screaming out for airbrushing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So let's have another look at the old comments. Pezapoo says the lantern steals money from your wallet. Well, I think the bird is trained to do that, actually, because if anything's going to tempt me to buy it, it would be that, not necessarily the lantern.
Of course, a pet bird isn't a new thing. The Wood Elves have had a couple of characters that had pet hawks.
Are we going to bring up Score the Falconer?
Yeah. It used to be, Score the Falconer. In one of the old Wood Elf army books, there was actually a unit type called Falconer. And kind of like skirmishers, I suppose, skirmishers, archers. And then there was a model for Score, which I got, which looked a bit weird. I think it might have been a Marauder model. I ended up selling mine in the end. I didn't like it. And of course, what's his face? Begins with A, doesn't it? Araloth. Araloth is a wood elf hero who's in the Fluff has now disappeared into Alariel, her new realm, which is under siege at the minute by Nurgle in the Fluff. But he has a faithful hawk, or is it a falcon? So it's nothing new in Warhammer.
Have I told my particular tale of Score the Falconer before?
No, please.
Where one of my opponents used to play Wood Elves, and he pretty much brought Score the Falconer to every game. And I played Chaos Warriors back in those days, and it was when the Realm of Chaos box first came out. I'm sure I've told this story before, but I'll do it anyway. So at the beginning of the game, you would get these Chaos gifts, which were just random cards you would draw before the game, and it would have different things on it, like you may unleash 2d6 strength something hits on this particular unit. So whatever came up, if it was anything that caused damage, I would immediately put it all on Score the Falconer and just kill him immediately. He wasn't even that good. It was just like a grudge I built up against him, and it never failed to happen. I don't think I ever let him live after the Chaos Gift phase, which was pre-game. So,
Andy, how when you play Warhammer Fantasy, if you're playing with the same people more often than not, you end up having these grudges, and all tactics go out the window, and you just kind of see red while you're playing and think about that unit that killed off your favorite models in the last game, and you put all your energies into killing those guys. Like, you know, when I play you, it's your dwarf engineer, and I will go to ridiculous lengths to kill off the engineer, even when it's of no real consequence or a tactical benefit to myself. I will go for that guy, and it makes me feel great, even if I lose the game.
You're not the only one though, because when I was at Adepticon in the tournament, someone went out of his way to shoot down the engineer when there were much better targets around. So I think it must be something about that model that just cheeses people off.
There's got to be a word for it. You've got road rage, haven't you? What would you call it in your playing fantasy?
There are a lot of different rages that people can suffer while playing fantasy. But I think what may have caused it was his uneven suntan, actually. Because it was the old flesh wash, the really, really strong one.
Right.
That if you apply it to a bright pink dwarf, he looks like he's just been sunbathing, or he fell asleep in the sunbed and woke up about 6 hours later. And it makes him look a bit like that if you put it on a bit too strongly. So right. I think maybe that happened to him, because it is one of the older models that I painted.
Right, that makes sense then.
It does. So James Mabry says, I've been resisting them, but I'm slowly coming around. I'll most likely include a unit of paladins at some point with my Brett army. The keyword paladin would give buffs to my peasants. Well, and that's what I think is going to be the future. Stormcast with just a ragtag band of peasants helping them out. The same way that Space Marines always were dropped down onto the planets to help the kind of beaten down and worn out Imperial Guard regiment that was holding back the tide of the aliens. I could see it getting into that kind of situation, because Sigmar's light, it does shine everywhere, but he only has so many sort of Stormcast. They can't be everywhere at once. There's a lot of chaos to smite. So, let's see. Hyperkinako says, rules for the banner guy are leaked and he calls down a meteor. Well, there we go. So that sounds like fun. If anyone can tell us exactly how that works, that would be nice. Let's see what else. We've got plenty of new people who've hopped in to watch.
Oh, welcome everybody.
Yeah, we've got Casually Cataclysmic. We've got MC1 Gamer, who, it has to be said, has been pushing my engagement rating on my videos through the roof this month, this week at least, because I don't know if you saw, but I put up a video kind of rekindling the debate on summoning the other day.
Yeah, I saw it today. An MC1 Gamer went off on the comment.
He was
crazy.
I thought punches were actually going to fly through the internet. I thought he'd actually come up with a way to insert his fist into a USB port and have it exit someone's monitor and punch them in the face the way they were going at it.
What is it about people from New Jersey? They just get really angry, don't they?
I don't know, but I don't know where the guy he was arguing with's from. But yeah, it got a little bit nuts in there, and I'm just happy to sit back and let them have it.
I've got a message for Mitch actually, because he messaged me and I didn't write back to him about a follow-up video for the Beastmen War Scrolls video that we did. Mitch, I will be messaging you, but I think next week or the week after would be good for me. If that's any good for you. There you go.
Well, I'm glad you got that little personal correspondence out the way. So you did watch the summoning video then?
Yeah, I did, Andy. Yeah, it was all right.
Where are you leaning at the moment on the whole debate, which seems to have divided the community 50-50?
Well, it bores me senseless, mate. It makes me not want to play undead. And I don't know, mate. I don't know. I can see the logic in both arguments. So, you know, if you've got 4 different unit types on the actual battlefield and one of them's a necromancer, some people are saying you can only summon what you've got on the table, which seems a bit limiting, really, because you'd want to be summoning stuff that hasn't appeared yet. That's the whole point of summoning, right?
Yes, I think the main issue is that one side of the argument makes the rules too limiting, and the other side of the argument lets you go completely nuts, and Nagash can suddenly bring on 18 units in one go.
Yeah.
And starting off on the table on his own.
Well, I think that's very simple. I'd just put a house rule in. All right, you can summon anything as long as it's in your army. You know, you can't be summoning a dragon if you're undead. You can't be summoning on a giant. That doesn't make sense. And maybe you should also, a house rule is that only each caster can only summon a unit once per turn. You know, so even though the Gash has got lots of spells, he can't summon more than one unique unit per turn. That might help a bit, no?
Yeah, there are lines in the rules and in various war scrolls that hint at one side of the argument winning ahead of the other, but they don't always line up on the same side. So you've got one sentence that supports one argument and another supporting a different one. So unless it's actually officially clarified, I don't think it's ever going to be completely settled. So I think the best way of doing it is just talk to your opponent and decide what you're going to do for that particular game, whatever's going to be fair for your scenario. If you think something's going to be fun for that game, like we've talked about before, if you've got a necromancer school under attack from the Stormcast who are trying to get rid of this evil, this blight on the land, then of course you're going to want the necromancers to be able to summon units that aren't on the table. Otherwise, it's just going to be 5 necromancers in a line fighting with their wooden sticks.
I have to say, Andy, that if you take away summoning from undead, they are quite weak. It's a weak army, in my opinion, compared to what other stuff can do.
They are, but what you'd also
kill the necromancer, stop the summoning.
Once you establish they're weak, you would then look at that before the game and think, okay, we'll just use more undead now because we played other games and I just got whooped. So let's add in another unit of crypt horrors and another terrorgeist and see if that evens it out. So I think that's how you would generally do it.
Right.
You would also have to base it on what the chances are of a necromancer summoning any units and how that should boost up his power level, because of course he could just die in turn 1. And if you factored in him bringing on 5 units during the game, that's not the most fun way of doing it necessarily, because undead are going to be pretty much smushed at that point. It's a complicated issue, because as soon as something is summoned onto the table by random chance, then it unbalances the game, and people don't like that. A lot of people want the game to be nicely lined up and balanced, which Age of Sigmar was clearly not intended to be. So I think you really just have to roll with it a little bit, and whatever comes onto the table, just have to deal with it, build that into your little narrative. And the odds are suddenly stacked against one side. That doesn't necessarily mean it's game over. It just means maybe you need to come up with some different victory conditions midway into the game, perhaps. You know, like the old saying in playground football, next goal wins.
Yeah.
Something along those lines to just equalize it a little bit if one side's running away with it.
Like I said, the debate is starting to bore me a bit, to be honest, Andy. And it's turning me off from undead. You know, it should be a fun thing to be able to summon stuff without going overboard. You know, without summoning a load of Nagashes and stuff. That's just silly, isn't it? I'm sure if we were playing it, we'd keep it sensible. being gamers that like to play use models that are just there, you know, primarily for fun before tactics. To be honest, if you summon stuff on the table, it wouldn't bother me because I know you do it in the spirit of the game.
Yeah, what it comes down to, if we played 100 games against each other and one of us was undead every time, we probably wouldn't have a bad summoning experience because we'd be playing it in the right way. It's only an issue for people that make it an issue, I think. And that's the thing with these rules. If you want to play them in a fun and fair manner, you've got the scope to do that. If you want to go very silly and just break the game, then you can also do that. But it's not advisable because who's going to want to play against that?
No, exactly. I think Games Workshop have designed this game to root out the arseholes. You know, maybe to root out the people that are ruining the game by being too competitive. And they've done a great job in doing that so far, in my opinion.
I'm going to have to agree with you. Just based on our little section of the community, I think that's definitely the case. So, now, I think people have been waiting long enough. They want some pictures of the Reef Town adventure, don't they?
Yeah. So how many games did you get in?
Well, we got in 2 games. And I'm going to share the old screen and show you some images right now. So first of all, here's the journey in the wonderful Pez van, the Pezmobile, if you will. And look how focused he is on the road. Even a vastly experienced driver like him, he still knows that you have to keep your eyes on the road at all times, no distractions whatsoever.
He looks stoned.
Well, I certainly hope he wasn't. Now, here's some of the game we've got set up. Now, Mr. Reef has a very nice table. He has lots of kind of scattered, I'm not exactly sure what it would be. It's kind of green, fluffy stuff. It's not quite flock. It's not quite grass. What would you call that?
Well, I've got a box full of stuff like that. I think you call it underbrush.
Well, I had a good forage through Mr. Reef's underbrush. And you can see there, these are nice terrain pieces as well. There isn't a huge amount of terrain on the table because a lot of it is just that kind of just decorative fluff, if you will.
I think I had a conversation with Reef yesterday and he told me that he went all out to impress you guys.
He did, and it did look good, has to be said. And I did speculate that this Garden of More here might be replaced at some point where they just give you a single fence section and it'll be named the Garden of Less. But they keep the price the same, of course. So you can see I brought my dwarves along for this day.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure if any of these pictures are going to be blurry because it was just very amateurish on my phone kind of pictures. I mean, the camera's not too bad. There, look at that. We've got 2 slayers with their bare butt cheeks exposed, one significantly larger pair than the other. Heading up there, and you can see the beastmen. Now, there is a funny story to this. Because the first game, we had my dwarves against the combined might of the Stormcast Eternals and some beastmen. You can see the Jabber slide there. And the Ungor Raiders, I think he started off with about 35 Ungor Raiders. And all that shot at them, I'm pretty sure it was either some Thunderers or some Iron Drakes. And they killed quite a lot of them immediately. He wasn't very pleased that I targeted his Ungor Raiders instantly at the start of the game. And then the other half of the unit ran away from battle shocks. There was only like 5 of them left for the rest of the game after the first turn.
So they didn't get a shooting round? They
did later on, I think. But he was very disappointed with how all that went down.
I bet he was, because they get a bonus, don't they? There's a lot of them.
They do. It's safe to say he wasn't getting any bonuses at all when shooting with those Ungors. I didn't take a particularly effective list because I just wanted to throw stuff down on the table that I hadn't necessarily used in these games. So there's just got some basic dwarf warriors there. No iron breakers in sight.
Any no iron drakes?
There are iron drakes off camera, don't worry. Can't go anywhere without them. There they are. This is the meaty side here.
Right.
Got the hammerers and the iron drakes, and you can see they're lining up against the Stormcast. I don't know if you can see very well, but they've got the Judicators there, or as the Americans call them, the Judicators, and the prosecutors behind them, or the prosecutors, as they call them. And I think you can just about see Pezapoo's inner thigh there with those dice. So you can see the terrain's very nice, isn't it?
It looks awesome, man.
I just took fairly small units for this game.
So was it a free for all? What was the matchup?
Well, the dwarves were taking on the team of Beastmen and Stormcast, because if you've been following Mr. Reef's little narrative series, his Beastmen have been recruited into the Stormcast Eternals.
Yeah.
So the ones that hadn't been converted yet were sent into battle alongside their freshly armor-clad brethren. And this was the result. So you can see that one of the Slayers was immediately killed. I think it might have been the Jabber's sticky tongue that got him, or it may have been the Judicators, but the Judicators are nasty. The one with the really special bow, it does something like D6. If it hits, it does D6 wounds or something like that.
Wow.
It's some ridiculous thing. It might be if you roll a 6, then it does a huge amount of wounds. But it was very, very powerful in this game. And I found that the size of my dwarf units wasn't really sufficient to handle it because they were just beastly. And I've always, looking at the rules, I preferred the bowmen, Judicators, to the guys with the crossbows. Because even though you get more shots with the crossbows, you do have to get close up. And in Age of Sigmar, movement is not that limited, so people are going to get right in your face as soon as you get that close. But with the bowmen, with their 24-inch range, you can really keep them back, and they are deadly, as I found out.
The dwarf armor wasn't effective?
Not against those.
Right. What, they got rend on the shots then?
I think they do have one, probably.
Yeah.
But if I had... Of course, Iron Breakers and Iron Drakes are good against that because they ignore rend of 1.
Yeah.
So the second Slayer there, I was hoping to get him into a battle to the death with one of the Jabberslythes. But I think all that ended up happening was that he was killed by the Jabberslythe, and then his death blow did a few wounds on it. Which it's not bad. That's what you really want them. They're kind of like kamikaze units that you just send into a big monster, the Slayers. Because even if they get killed, they're still going to dish out some pain on the way down with the death blows. Look at that Jabber. Mr. Reef's models are quite tasty.
That stripy tongue, so funny.
It's like your dwarf spearman, isn't it?
Yeah, do you know why he's done that, though? He's done that deliberately so he doesn't forget the rule. You know, if you do something quite absurdly, you always notice it. So when it comes to your turn, you're always going to remember that he's got a sticky tongue attack.
And what came up in the fights with the Jabberslythe was that the pile-in move, it's worth noting that that's optional. So if you're fighting a Jabberslythe in close combat and you don't necessarily want to damage it because its black blood is going to spill back onto you and kill all your troops, then you can elect not to pile in with half your troops.
Right.
Just so you don't do too much damage to it.
Did you use retreat at all?
There wasn't a whole lot of retreating going on in these games, I have to be honest. It was a bit of a bloodbath. And, I mean, look at that. What chance have they got, those Thunderers?
Yeah.
And I don't know if anyone can see there, but there's the wonderful Litco brand Age of Sigmar tokens and accessories down there.
Cool.
Unit activated, which I found very handy because we did have some quite complicated combats. And at the back there, Mr. Reef has his own nice little wound tokens.
Nice. It must have been harsh being on the receiving end of a dozen years of Reef's fury from being the underdog with his beastmen to find.
Well, it was quite a tongue lashing, as you can see here, from both sides. And look at this now. When the Stormcast really get in there, they just chew through people's faces. And the double Jabber as well, because they have the aura of insanity, or whatever it's called, some of the dwarf units, as you can see there with the unhappy face on the right, they were so disturbed by the Jabberslythe's foul appearance that they just weren't going to do anything for the whole turn.
Oh dear.
And because of the way the turn sequence works, the rule actually says in their next turn, they're unable to move, shoot, or do all these things. But if the Beastmen go first and use that ability, and it's effective, then there's potential that the other side could get 2 turns in a row, or the beastmen could get 2 turns in a row. So it means you could end up missing more or less turns than originally thought.
I see.
So it's complicated that way. But the way it worked out badly for me in this instance, because the beastmen got more turns, which meant that they were chewing on my iron drakes for longer without me being able to fight back, because they got a second turn in a row after using that ability.
I see.
So it's very interesting. It throws up a lot of tactical conundrums. And you can look at that. They're just getting eaten there because they've got the unhappy face. That means they still can't fight back. So they were just being eaten by Mr. Vandus Hammerhand there.
It looks like you managed to, obviously shoot a few Ungors off, and then you got trounced.
Yeah, basically. That's what happened. Maybe I focused a little too much on the Ungor Raiders because Mr. Reef was bigging them up before the game, talking about how amazing they are. In 35s, they can re-roll 1s, they can re-roll 2s. They can shoot fireballs out their backsides.
Yeah. See, there's the example right there of a grudge. It was an unconscious grudge, wasn't it? Because of what my Ungors have done to you in the past.
Well, I hope they were just unconscious at the end of the game, all my dwarves, because they certainly weren't walking about. Yeah, they do have a grudge. There is a score that needs to be settled against both the Stormcast and the Beastmen. But as I was saying, though, I didn't take very competitive armies. I didn't take a lot of war machines because I wanted everyone to be able to get stuck in. Because obviously we were there to play games, but the main focus was, of course, to just experience the pilgrimage to Reef Town. And before I go on to game 2, I'll just temporarily stop that screen share for a minute. And I'm going to talk about the quality of the food at Mr. Reef's abode. The bacon sandwiches, excellent quality. He cooks some mean rashers of bacon. Fresh loaf of bread. You can't ask for more than that, can you? Although, because the bacon was taking so long, I think Mr. Pezzapoo ended up with a pizza, which to me didn't look quite so appetizing. And I think Mr. Reef may have made a little bit of a blunder with the cooking of it, so that when it came out, it seemed to me it looked like a kind of floppy pizza. I think if you rested it on top of your arm, it was supposed to be kind of thick, but it looked like it would have just drooped on either side of your hand if you put it there, to me. So I don't know if that was fully satisfying for Mr. Pez. But the bacon, very, very tasty. And also, I would have been immediately dismayed, because some people, when they're making bacon sandwiches, they just instinctively start spreading butter on the bread, don't they?
Yeah.
That's a no-no, in my opinion. Can't be having butter on bacon sandwiches. No way. But some people just do that instinctively.
Yeah.
Leave a comment talking about your bacon sandwich etiquette. If you're making bacon sandwiches for someone, how far do you go in the preparation before you find out their preferences? Do you even cook the bacon first, or do you wait and find out how well done they like it? Do you ask if they want it crispy? Let us know, people. This is information we need to have, I think. So, I'm going to go back on the old screen share and go on to game number 2. So, let's look at this cinematic view right here. I'm assuming you can see that very nicely, Mr. Rem.
Wow, them trees look awesome, don't they?
We've got dwarves again lined up against a huge beastman horde with just monsters aplenty. Mr. Reef kindly donated his beastmen for Mr. Pez to use in this game because Mr. Pezzapoo was thinking, well, these beastmen are really cool. I might actually get some of them one day.
Right.
So, of course, Mr. Reef smelled the opportunity to swell the herd, as it were, and thought, well, if there's a potential new recruit here, I've got to get him into this. So I'll give him all these minotaurs to use. And then Mr. Reef actually came over onto my side for this game and took control of some of the dwarves. I think he may have been doing that just to sabotage my game plan, though. That's what I'm thinking. You can see the units I put out slightly bigger this time, slightly more hammerers, because look at all those minotaurs. I've got to do something, haven't I?
Yeah.
Got the big gigantic pair of butt cheeks there again.
Minotaurs are really good.
They are. An organ gun. Now, organ gun in 8th edition, it always served me well. Before the new book, it served me well. after the new book, it served me even better because I'm not sure whether it got better, but it got a lot more reliable. It was almost impossible to blow up once the new book came out in 8th. However, in this game, it failed to fire every time it attempted to fire. Because obviously you choose the number of barrels, and then the more you choose, the more chance there is of it just not firing. And I was thinking, well, I'll go for 3 barrels every time. That means I need to roll a 3+ for it to fire. Yeah. I didn't take any engineers because I didn't take anything too cheesy. And that backfired horribly. So it didn't fire at all, and then it eventually got eaten, which we'll get to. But I would say engineer is a must. And I did actually say, after these games, next time I'm bringing an engineer, just sticking him in the middle of a big artillery battery, 2 organ guns, 2 cannons, 2 grudge throwers, 2 flame cannons, everything, and seeing if anything can deal with that little barrage. I don't think it could
be the case that when I see dwarves being fielded in Age of Sigmar, you do need a character, some kind in there to give them some balls, so to speak.
Well, to give them some cannonballs, definitely you do need an engineer. Now there is George and Mildred, the Etin.
That's such an awesome model, man.
With a couple of nice eggs there, grilling away, with a dwarf head in there. Moving on, and you can look at Mr. Pez behind. It's either Cyril the Cygor, or we did actually try and name the Gorgon between us. The name I came up with, I cannot remember right now. Oh yeah, it was Granola.
I like Graham.
Granola the Gorgon. Maybe Graham Cullen the Gorgon.
Yeah.
I could go for that.
How did he do? How did the Cygor do?
Well, for this particular game, I think they were using it as a Gorgon.
Okay.
And it did very well. You'll see what it does in a minute. But look, there's another picture with Mr. Pez in the background. You can see the monsters getting stuck in there. It took down a lot of hammerers. They just have so many wounds, those things. And the Gorgon, it has some weird special rules as well so that it can heal itself.
Yeah.
So it was continually doing that. And then look at that. Organ gun. 4 Minotaurs in its face. It's not going to stand up to that.
No way.
I mean, there's a slight advantage compared to the previous editions in that war machines can still carry on firing while people are trying to eat them. But they're not going to last long enough to attempt that when you've got 4 Minotaurs in your face.
No.
Definitely not. And then look at that. To round off the day, what a beautiful, inspiring image that was.
Did you feel like mentally exhausted after your games?
I felt mentally exhausted by the time I got there because of the journey.
Yeah.
And the fact that I was up at 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
After the games weren't particularly mentally exhausting because there wasn't a whole lot of technical brilliance being thrown around.
No.
It was pretty much a let's crunch everything in and see who wins kind of game. So there weren't too many optimum choices being taken. With 3 people being there, it's difficult to get that kind of tactical, in-depth goodness. It's much more of a laid-back atmosphere.
Sure. How long did each game take?
It depends, because the game was technically still going on for quite a while, but we weren't actually playing it for a fair portion of that.
Right.
We were just chatting away, discussing the Warhammer community and so on, and all those wonderful broad topics that we like to discuss now and then.
So from what Reef tells me, he gets to get a lot of games in. All right.
It sounds like he does, yeah. I wanted to get Mr. Reef on this very show, actually, but unfortunately, he did have a legitimate reason. He is occupied. He had a prior engagement tonight. So hopefully we'll be able to get him on soon.
That'd be really cool. Hopefully everyone's seen Mr. Reef's appearance on Warhammer Weekly last Wednesday, and it's got to be one of the highlights of Warhammer alternative television.
It has to be said, he did elevate that show to new heights. Well, he elevated them to heights, really.
I'm not sure if the American audiences get sarcasm.
I kind of hope they don't. I think that makes it funnier.
Yeah. They played along really well.
So, despite the fact that you were unable to make it to that wonderful Reef Town expedition, what have you been doing in the hobby, at least?
Well, I've
been doing something.
Yeah, I've been rebasing stuff. I have been. I bought one of these new Citadel dry brushes, and what else did I get? Another type of brush. I've got a big one lying here somewhere. I never seem to find the stuff that I actually need, and when I don't need it, oh, there it is. Yeah, and I got a base brush, but they're new design ones. They're fairly good. They look a lot more sturdy.
Do they have quite a rigid tip?
Yeah, they do. So what I've been doing, I've been basing these witch elves. I've got out my dark elf army, which is kind of half complete really. And I just thought, them and my ogres, I'm just going to leave them out and try and get through as much as I can. But painting's an extremely complex process because it's, you know, it's not just the models, it's the bases. And now I'm rebasing some of them and keeping old bases as they were. And it's just taking a lot of time. You know, when you possess a lot of armies, it's a real labour of love. And you do lose focus, I'd have to say. But you don't lose boredom. You don't get the boredom factor of painting the same model over and over again or the same faction. So, I don't know. I'm just painting bits and bobs. I've got 3 Blood Warriors painted as well. I've got the Chaos guy with the whip over there. I'm half done him. But, yeah, having seen the expense I've splashed out on these witch elves, I want to make them really nice. And they were all painted, but I decided to repaint them and give them using pallid witch flesh for their skin and painting tattoos on their flesh and giving them a shock white of hair. And on my test model, it certainly worked out really well. So that's kind of making all the other ones look a bit poor. So I'm repainting them.
Yeah, that's the problem with kind of upping your game mid-unit, isn't it?
It is. I mean, these models are £36 for 10. You know, that's like what, $50, $55 or something like that. So, you know, I went out and bought them, so I want to make them look good. You know, but yeah, I've tried not to buy any new models. As tempting as tempted as I get, I'm really not buying any more for the foreseeable future because I've got more than enough to keep me occupied for the next couple of years.
Well, I haven't been painting anything Warhammer related, but I have been working on some bolt action. Got some Belgians, which is technically an American heavy machine gun with Belgian heads on it, because they don't have a model for the Belgian heavy machine gun. They don't have the model for the Belgian a lot of things, it has to be said. They're not a very popular side.
They got overrun, didn't they? They got blitzkrieg.
Yeah, they didn't last very long at all. They lasted less than 3 weeks in the war, which probably explains why not many people play them and not a lot of companies support their model range. So you have to improvise a bit. It takes some dedication to play them. Also,
oh God,
something else turned up in the post. Finally, 2 items. 1. Kings of War Gamers Edition. Now, I'm going to give everyone a very handy-dandy tip now. If you've got any paperback books or softback books, what you want to do is get a piece of tape. I don't know if you can see the extra shine on the corner there. Put a piece of tape over the corner and kind of fold it on the inside of the page. I don't know if you can see that. Can you?
Yeah.
You fold it over the inside, and then that stops you getting frayed edges on your corners.
Okay, yeah, that's wicked.
Yeah, you can't do it on hardback because eventually it will peel off and just potentially ruin it. But hardback, they don't need that much protection anyway. It's mainly the kind of flimsier paperback ones that need that. So definitely advisable. I always do that with all my books. Usually that's how I can tell they're mine if they ever get mixed in with somebody else's. at an event or something. But now that I've given out that tip, surely everyone's going to be doing it because we do have a worldwide reach on this show. So that was the paperback edition, which just has the rules. Now we've got the extra beefy, full-size hardback rulebook for Kings of War, which contains the rules again, such as this, but also contains all the ever-developing Mantic Kings of War backstory, which is quite extensive. I haven't got into reading too much of it yet, but I think I will do, actually. I think I'm going to make a commitment from now on to actually try and read a bit more fluff in the games that I'm playing.
So have Kings of War just basically ripped off Games Workshop completely in their fluff as well as their models?
The fluff, it's from what I've read so far, it's not particularly Warhammer-like. It's obviously inspired from the same genre, the kind of Lord of the Rings type, where you've got elves, dwarfs, orcs, humans, and all that. But there aren't really too many similarities between the Warhammer Old World and the world of Mantica, as it's known.
But isn't it a bit strange that within a month or so of Warhammer Fantasy changing rules, Kings of War bring out a new edition?
I think that was very well timed indeed. Because when they put up the Kickstarter, of course, Games Workshop hadn't officially announced anything regarding their new edition. There were just rumours circulating, and I'm sure the people at Mantic probably heard those rumours and decided, you know what, if they really do go to round bases, I think there's going to be a lot of very unhappy, especially tournament players from Fantasy.
Right.
So what I saw on Facebook that Mantic actually sent some of their softback rulebooks to one of the big gaming tournaments or something.
Yeah.
So they're definitely making a push for the tournament players, and the game is very balanced from what I've seen so far. There are beta rules as well for all the races, for the people that maybe are kind of refugees from 8th edition. So there's rules for armies that are very similar to lizard men, for example. They're not in the book, though. They're going to be coming out in a separate document, I believe, when they're finalized. At the moment, they're still in the testing phase. But it seems like a very nice, solid product so far. So pleased with that.
From what you've seen, when Age of Sigmar came out, there was a lot of hoo-ha and people saying, "Oh, right, we're gonna flock over, we're gonna be migrants over to Kings of War and War Machine." Do you think that's happened?
I think the small percentage of the highly competitive tournament players have moved on, if YouTube's anything to go by.
Right.
But I think overall, I don't think there's been an increase in activity in Fantasy, if anything, because a lot of old timers have been coming back because the rules are simpler now, and it was the complicated rule set that put them off and sent them deserting Fantasy in the first place. So now that it's kind of got, I was going to say back to basics, but I think it's gone further back to basics than it ever has been.
Yeah, and of course they've got the 40k guys taking a look into the Warhammer stuff now as well, haven't they? They've got 40k guys looking into Age of Sigmar because it looks so similar now.
It's kind of 50-50 on that. Some of the 40k people are interested in Age of Sigmar because the rules are simpler and they're kind of more free-flowing and less restrictive like the rules they're used to. But on the other hand, half of them are terrified that they're going to do the same thing to 40k.
Right.
So
do you think they'll do that?
I think we'll learn a lot when they bring out the next game, which I believe is going to be the Horus Heresy plastic game.
Okay.
If the rules for that game are in any way edging towards Age of Sigmar territory, I think people are going to completely flip. I think they'll go nuts because they'll have seen what reaction the vocal minority of the fantasy community had. Of course, they think that speaks for everybody.
Yeah.
Because if someone's completely satisfied with the product, often they don't talk about it. They just play the game.
Yeah.
There's only people that are really angry that are guaranteed to make themselves heard. So I think the 40k players will go into full panic mode if their system seems to be heading that way. And their fluff as well. can you imagine if they took away or completely changed the Space Marines, or completely retconned something?
I think it'd be really funny if, you know how they've brought out the Sigmarites for fantasy, if they brought out a real old school looking Warhammer Fantasy faction as New 40k and infiltrated it that way. You know, I don't know. What's a classic looking Warhammer Fantasy faction?
Well, they've already got Space Marines that look like dwarves. They've got the Space Wolves who have the big beards.
Yeah.
So I don't know what more you could do, really.
Halflings? Space halflings.
Space halflings. That's like a step below squat, isn't it?
Yeah.
What would you call them?
Half knots.
The halves and half knots. Interesting. So let's have a look at the comments again. So Danny Ashby says, most of the unit selection I advise see is along the lines of you can do anything or nothing matters, which isn't particularly helpful. Yeah, I think someone new to the game who's trying to choose an army, if all you're greeted with is take whatever you want, and people just like throwing their arms in the air and setting off fireworks all over the place, that's probably not what you want. You do want a little bit of sound advice. So I think it's fine to have some kind of structure. And you can, if you're going to advise someone on what to take in Age of Sigmar, you shouldn't just tell them take whatever you want, because then they'll just pick out Nagash and stick that down on the table and say, yeah, but really you shouldn't use that unless your opponent agrees to it and they've got something equally powerful. You shouldn't throw in the small print after they've already decided to buy it.
I hear what you're saying, Andy. I think MC1 Gamer's done a great job by putting out these War Scrolls videos where he goes through each faction, they look at each unit in turn. You know, Danny, I think you should look at, if you haven't seen them already, check out them videos on the faction that interests you, and then from that maybe you can get a good, you can make a good call on what units to start getting.
On a little side topic, I would just say go to the forums for all the different factions out there, because there are forums for all the individual races from Warhammer. But what I've noticed on the Dwarf forum, the one that I used to frequent, I posted something about Age of Sigmar on there, and it didn't get any responses. And then I found it disappeared, and it was moved to a kind of further down section for Age of Sigmar related posts. So it's like they want to keep the rest of the forum pure for 8th edition, and then they've set up this little slot at the bottom just for Age of Sigmar.
Right.
Just for the people that want to play that and aren't real players anymore. That's the vibe it kind of gives off to me.
Wow.
I don't know if other forums have followed that line of thought, but obviously the people you get on forums are going to be the more hardcore players usually, because they're interested in sharing tactics and really delving into the fluff and whatnot. And those are obviously the things that have been destroyed. You can't use the same tactics, and the fluff, while it does exist, the timeline just isn't there anymore. So I can understand those people who are so heavily invested in that period sticking with it. But I would like to see them embrace the new game a little bit more, because eventually they are going to get left behind. It is going to be a sinking ship.
Yeah, what will happen is either they'll change or new forums will take their place, unfortunately.
They will do eventually. There are multiple Facebook groups out there that have already sprung up for Age of Sigmar, and a lot of them seem to be thriving. And one of the Facebook group that I put our pre-show questions out to this week was Age of Sigmar. That's the name of the group. I'm sure there are probably multiple groups with that name now, but they've got about 1,300 members-ish. So I posed that there. And one question that came in, I can't find exactly who it was that posted it because I can't find it right now. But he brought up this discussion topic of, in a game like Age of Sigmar, should you be trying to make it tactical? Was the gist of it. Should you be, if you're going too far and twisting the game mechanics to your advantage, is that too much? And is that the way the game's designed? Is it designed kind of sloppily so that the only way you can be tactical is to kind of twist and break the game to gain the advantage? Or is there more to it than that? Was the gist of his question. It's a reasonable thing to ask. I don't really agree with it if that was his viewpoint. I think he was just legitimately opening it up for debate.
I think the key to it is again thinking about chess. And when you first start playing chess, you can't really think more than one move ahead because you're getting used to the way the pieces work, and you react to what your opponent is doing at the same time. But as you develop as a chess player, you start to think 2 moves ahead, and you start to think of all the possibilities and ramifications of each move you make. And in turn, you think of all the various things you can do and its ramifications on the other person's turn. And I think just in any tactical game, the better you are at it, the more ahead you can think and predict and think about all the possibilities of what's going to happen. So, yeah, I think it can be a tactical game. I think we're still infant players, if you like, and we're not thinking in that way at the moment because we're still getting to know the raw scrolls, and there's so many different complexities because there's so many factions. And within each faction, there's so many different troop types, and you're measuring that against other factions and other troop types, and all the different, what's the word? All the different possibilities that can bring up. It is too early to say, in my opinion, but I think it can be tactical. Yeah.
The criticism he was making was that for people to make the game tactical, they're kind of twisting it in a way that wasn't intended, and they're actually breaking it and saying, "Okay, this is me being tactical now." When really they're just breaking the game, and the designers didn't intend it to be played that way. You're just finding a mechanic and a loophole within the mechanic because the rules are brief, so you can kind of twist them in your own way, and then using that to your advantage. So what I think is that's going to happen in any game. In 8th edition, I'm sure when they were writing it, they didn't intend for a single eagle to be able to park itself at an angle in front of a horde of 30 trolls and stop them from charging the unit behind the eagle. There's no way they could have thought that made sense when they were writing 8th edition. And I believe that was quite prevalent in 7th as well, but I didn't play 7th.
That's a great point you're making there, Andy.
But whatever game system you come out with, there are always going to be ways of twisting it that were unforeseen.
Yeah.
There's very little way around that. The more testing you do, obviously, the more you can iron out those issues because people are more likely to spot them, and you can put in a rule that specifically covers that situation, which I believe, going back to Kings of War again, that's kind of what they've done with that. They did so much testing, and there are rules that cover those little situations. Like, for example, you can't be held up by a single model, because you can, when you wipe out single model in combat, you could then continue your charge and go through it and then fight another round of combat in the same turn against whatever's behind it.
Okay.
So it stops you being able to do that. And you don't have to adjust your facing when you're charging into just one little figure, as far as I know.
Yeah, Warhammer 8th edition did become a bit Napoleonic in that way, in people in tight formations, and they're kind of like tin soldiers, and they, you know, whenever they turn, it counts as some kind of weird movement. So there's always going to be gamesmanship in whatever you play. My advice is to play different people, play as many different people as you can.
Yeah, there are ways you can set up the game. You could set up units in 8th so that none of them could be charged. If you set up units around the terrain at weird enough angles, then there physically isn't room for them to charge you, and there isn't room for your unit to turn to face them either, which was the kind of the backup rule if they couldn't turn to face you. So they literally weren't allowed to charge you if you set up your army right. I've seen that happen. So I don't think this is necessarily a new thing for Age of Sigmar, that people are going to twist the rules around to their advantage. But what I like to think is that the community in Age of Sigmar is more made up of people that wouldn't necessarily do that than it was before. Because the win at all cost people, they don't like random chance in games, and Age of Sigmar has an awful lot of random chance. And there's no, you can't fine tune a list necessarily the same way you could. You can't go for maximum, you can't min-max. You can't get maximum effectiveness for its points out of a unit because there are no points. And whatever limits you impose on the game, you invite that style of play back in. As soon as you say, right, you can only take 10 war scrolls, people are going to say, right, which are the most potent 10 war scrolls? But again, whatever restrictions you do or don't have, if you're playing with the right kind of people, you generally won't have problems. You'll run into something in the game where you think, well, wait a minute, how do we resolve this? This doesn't seem to be covered clearly in the rules. And the friendlier the people are, the more chance there is that you're going to be able to overcome that in a friendly manner with a dice roll. Or if one person calmly makes a case, then you say, well, actually, I didn't look at it that way. Yeah, let's go with that. There's not going to be reaching across the table and punching each other in the face and throwing jabber slides at each other. No, although exactly. to be fair, no hyper-competitive, angry player like that would have a jabber slide.
Exactly, and all this is this scenario-based games as well. You know, you might not think to take, Dark Riders, because a few Dark Riders may not be all that powerful. If, perhaps you'd rather have a Hydra rather than 5 Dark Riders. But then if you want the speed to get over to your objective point for a certain time in the game, then that's your better choice. So
it doesn't matter if one side has 100 Stormcast and the other side has 10 goblins. If the scenario is there must be a goblin standing on this point at the end of any turn and they win, then it's not impossible, is it?
It's not impossible, and it's actually more fun like that as well.
Rather than having to meticulously write out army lists in every point, and you can only have a certain percentage of this kind of unit. And then the magic items stacked on top of those, and you forget which magic items you've got because it's different all the time.
Yeah, I think just try and get in as many games as you can with different people, so you don't become jaded with playing a small group of people that are over competitive. It can really put you off playing.
Now, there's an interesting point come up from Eldar Convert here, who says just because someone is competitive doesn't automatically make them censored. And I would say, yes, that's definitely true, because you can have people who are very competitive in that they want to try and win all the time. But that doesn't necessarily come at the expense of sportsmanship. Just because you want to win doesn't mean that you have to treat your opponent badly. So there are people out there that try to win as hard as they can, but they still play fair. However, there are also people who play in a very casual manner who you wouldn't want to play against. Because some people can take casual gaming too far, because you want your opponent to be trying to win, don't you? If your opponent's just being silly, facing all his troops the wrong way and dancing around the room and starting a food fight, throwing pizza at people, you could say that's an extremely laid-back game, but that's not really a game anymore. That's just somebody being silly. So there's two ends of the spectrum. You can take it too far either way. There's no reason that you can't be a competitive player and still be nice. And there's no reason that you can't be a casual player and still be a terrible person to play against. And sometimes you can have people who are actually deeply really competitive but kind of play under the guise of being casual to try and lull you in. And then when things start going wrong in the game, the veil slips a bit.
Of course, Sally, these things just have to be stated before the game. For instance, I'd say, look, do you know what? I want you to bring me your best game today. Let's have a real good fight. I'm going to bring what I think's my strongest list. You bring your strongest list, and let's see what happens. You just say that at the start, and then whatever happens, and it's been talked about before. So
he brings out 4 Nagashes. Then next time you'd say, look, bring your strongest list, but only 1 Nagash, not 4.
It's 4 Nagashes. It's just one character. You can't bring more than one named character.
Nagash and a Glotkin. And 3 Bloodthirsters.
Yeah, all right. Well, you're gonna, you set that up. You say, right, you can have one named character, 4 units, and 1 monster. There you go.
Potentially. And you could just say, literally, bring whatever you want, and then next time you see how unbalanced the game was and how unfair it was, and you either pick a scenario that heavily favors the side that is weaker, or you just tweak the list and say, actually, that's looking a bit much over there. Do you mind just taking that unit away? It's just communicating with each other across the table. It's not that difficult, is it?
Absolutely. And Games Workshop's bringing out these super bad models like the Gash and these big Celestian Primes and things like that. And if you spend a lot of money and time buying and painting and converting this stuff, you want to play it. So I can completely understand wanting to bring on these super powerful models to the game. But they were only intended to be one of those at a time. You can't have more than one Nagash. That's just silly, isn't it?
It would be very silly. Well, with his magic, surely he could clone himself multiple times. There's a scenario for you. Every turn a fresh Nagash pops up. I just hope you've brought an awful lot of undead models to summon. I actually think it's 16 units he can summon in a turn. Because he can cast 8 spells, and every time he successfully summons a unit, he gets another one for free, I think.
Yeah.
That's quite a lot. So
Well, I need to wrap up soon, my friend. I got an early start.
Yeah, I'm just going to delve into the comments for the final time, because oddly enough, I need to go to bed fairly early tonight as well, which makes a change.
Yeah.
So we've got a few people saying, no, they're not going to mess with Space Marines. They're too iconic. People love them so much, they're not going to mess with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's possible they won't mess with 40k at all, but you never know. If Age of Sigmar is doing really well. Let's see, Gloomdready Gaming, Halflings already serving the Imperial Guard. Yeah, they do have Ratlings. I'm not sure whether they're particularly widespread now. I don't know whether they appear in the current fluff at all. I know the models are still out there. I don't know if they're still available, actually. And let's see. Stu Gibson, rounds are nicer looking, but it's nice in Kings of War that you don't remove individual models, so you can make your regiments into cool dioramas. Yep, there's something to be said for both. You can even make units that you can use for both games, both systems. You can put them on round bases and then get bases that have holes in them, like the Lord of the Rings style trays. Build a little diorama on that and then just slot them in there if you want to use them for both.
Yeah.
Some people talking about Mr. MC1 Gamer's unlocking series, which is very nice, especially the dwarf video, for no particular reason other than the fact I was on it, which automatically boosts it above all the others. Danny Ashby, I checked the forums for Dark Elves, and from what I saw, it was pretty apocalyptic. Just a bunch of frothy rage and despair. Yeah, that's the experience I've had on some of the other forums. So I think maybe the forums aren't necessarily the best place to start nowadays. Maybe we'll be getting away from that. But there are a lot of very friendly Facebook groups, including, but not limited to, the Sanctuary of Sigmar, Age of Sigmar, Warhammer, Age of Sigmar. I'm sure some of these have many groups with the same name, but if you find the biggest ones, you'll get there. Let's see. Casually Cataclysmic says the Vampire Count forum is changing with the time. Sadly, the Wood Elf one is being stubborn. Yeah, that makes sense. I could see the Vampire, because the Undead kind of went through a bit of transition with the End Times more than anyone else. They were kind of thrust into bed with the Tomb Kings, the Vampire Counts, weren't they? So
yeah.
They've had more of a slow change.
Well, they've had a renaissance, haven't they? Whereas the Wood Elves are really in limbo. And when their fluff gets fleshed out in the new fluff, then it'll get reinvigorated a bit. But I gotta feel sorry for these guys that have been running these forums for years and years. They've had their game as they know it taken away from them. Of course, they're going to be disgruntled.
Yeah, you got to have some sympathy for them, definitely. People who've invested a lot of time, because I have run a forum or two in the past, and it does take a lot of work. People think it's easy. You just create it and sit there, but moderating, keeping out spam bots and everything, it's possibly even more difficult than a Facebook group, I would say. Let's see. Gloomdready Gaming, I personally build a fluffy army and then play it at its best tactically. I can on the table. I don't tailor lists. I normally have one list for one army and stick with it. Yeah, there's something to be said for that, just picking an army that matches the backstory that you've got for it. And then when you put it on the table, that's when you start thinking, okay, tactically, I'm going to play it like this, not necessarily in the army selection. I think that's the way to do it in Age of Sigmar, because your opponent could just turn up with anything. So it's difficult to plan for what you're going to come up against. It's not like in 8th where you knew pretty much you were going to have a big block, maybe another big block or two, and then some skirmishing or flying units around the side. That's not the case anymore. You could literally come up against anything. So you're best off just taking what you think looks cool and what fits in your particular backstory, and then work your tactics around that rather than the other way. Because if you think about it, people would go into the books in 8th edition and look through all the choices and think, well, that looks particularly powerful. I'm just thinking I'm going to order 3 of them now. Yeah. There's no point doing that anymore because there's no point values. So you just take whatever's cool to you. Let's see what else we've got here. Denny Ashby, advice is irrelevant with the old system of judgment. There has to be advice for things that work better than others. There just needs to be new advice based on experimentation. Yeah, I think it's difficult because I know she wants to play Dark Elves, but obviously there aren't any new Dark Elf rules outside of just the Dark Elf War Scroll. There isn't a new set of fluff for what the Dark Elves are bringing to the table now. Have the elves have come up in the fluff? Have they already?
Not so far, but I'm still a book behind. But I don't think so. There's still a mystery at the minute. Obviously, the woods have come alive, and that's why you see a repackaging of the Sylvaneth army. But so far, unless I'm mistaken, they haven't made an appearance. But we're waiting. And the dwarves haven't either, although the Sigmarines have gone into some dwarven ruins and remains. They haven't located the survivors of the Holocaust, if you like.
Interesting. It's going to be fun to see what they do with the dwarves. For me, anyway. I don't know whether everyone else cares about dwarves or not. I know they had a bit of a bad reputation in the last edition for just corner camping, but I didn't do that. So let's have a last look at the comments. Maybe the final one. Let's see. YouTube Newbie, I'll have a look at the Dark Elf list. And yeah, YouTube Newbie is offering the helping hand there. See, the community, we're so lovely, aren't we? We're always just reaching out to help each other. Giving each other sound advice. People come into the comments section on this show looking for help. And I like to think that we, along with our wonderful audience, deliver. Because the audience, they're a part of us. Once you've felt the warm glow of Sigmar's light, you're part of Sigmar's herd of glorious, shimmering, celestial sheep, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Definitely. So I think we can just about wrap it up there. So, Mr. Remington, have you enjoyed the show this evening?
I have. It's been nice and chilled, man. I've been able to paint a couple of bases and put some pallid witch flesh on some elven witches. So that's been cool.
Now,
I've dug out my mandolin for the first time in years. Heirloom of my grandfather.
Before we get into our final song of the night, I'm going to, as usual, tell the audience that if you're going to leave a comment to tell us how wonderful the show was and how you watched it all the way through and every second was worth it and people shouldn't dare skip even a single minute of it, then you should say so in the permanent comments by waiting until the show is off the air, refreshing the page, and then posting in the permanent comments section rather than in the chat box down the side, which is still just zooming along with comments, people interacting with each other willy-nilly. I don't know if we've used the term willy-nilly on this show before, but there you go. So, Mr. Remington, are you prepared to deliver some music?
I have. I've got... well, you sung me a couple of lines.
Yes, I did.
And I figured out that it was in the key of B flat, which is this one.
Okay.
Minor.
So, to sing you out, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be me. And I'm going to give you the beautiful photoshopped image for the show as I
love that.
Do so. Yeah, you can see us there on the rule books. There are a couple of things we didn't really get to on this episode because it was so packed, so we're going to save them for next time. So, that includes our journeys through fantasy, by the way.
Oh.
Where we started in fantasy gaming and films and books and all that good stuff. So,
I forgot about that. We'll have to do that next week.
Yeah, we will, because we had so much juicy goodness to sink our teeth into. There was so much non-stop red-hot audience interaction that we didn't get time. But maybe if there are 40k releases one week, we can really delve into that big time.
Yeah, I think last week or the week before I showed a bunch of my ogres. I think next week I'll get some pictures up of my dark elves, and you can see how they're looking at the minute.
Okay, here we go. The final song of the night. Stormcast, little Stormcast, believe Stormcast, little Stormcast, the dead shall rise. I send you to the realm, Stormcast, to purge the chaos scum. Down you go, armed with mighty hammers. Kick one's bomb. Stormcast, little Stormcast. No more skulls for the blood god. Stormcast, little Stormcast. Give them a slap with a tuna or cod.